Hi, this is Justin Colletti. You may know me from Sonic Scoop, but today I am with Plugin Alliance and Bettermaker, and I have a special guest on today, an amazing producer, engineer named Romesh Dodangoda. Romesh is a producer. He's out of South Wales. He's worked on a tremendous number of really great heavy rock, metal productions, artists like Motörhead. Recently nominated for a Grammy for his work recording the latest record from Bring Me the Horizon. He's worked with Bullet for My Valentine, Twin Atlantic, so many other great artists out there. So Romesh, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure.
All right, great to have you on. We're going to talk about Romesh's process. He has a ton of analog hardware behind him. You can probably see some of it in the shot, but he also uses a ton of software and also a ton of Plugin Alliance plugins. Our excuse for this conversation today is that recently the Bettermaker EQ232D EQ has been released, which Romesh has been trying out and has been a big fan of. I've been trying it out. I'm a big fan of it. I just did a demo video for Plugin Alliance and Bettermaker on it. Really fun kind of Pultec style EQ, but without some of that Pultec style grit and distortion. Really great for low end and top end shaping. More about that later. Really want to dive into talking to Romesh about his process, his approach to working in a studio with so much great analog hardware and so many great digital tools, and how he kind of makes those two worlds work together. So Romesh, big fan of your work. Thanks so much for joining us today. And how are things in Wales today?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, it's a pretty miserable day outside, but...
Well, that's how it is in Wales. That's why you make such good music, because you're locked up inside all the time.
Yeah.
It's a great looking studio there. This is Longwave. This is your studio?
Yeah, so this is my private studio, which I've had for so long. It's everything is set up exactly how I want it to be set up, so I can kind of walk in and things are ready to go.
Right. Now, just to give people a brief synopsis for what you were telling me before the call, it sounds like these days you're using your hardware. And a lot of people, if you move your head slightly, they can probably see the rack of the outboard gear, right next to your amps there, that you use your analog hardware when it comes to recording, getting sounds going in. But once you've recorded things, you switch to almost all digital at that point. Is that right? Is that kind of a rough idea of the breakdown for you?
Pretty much. I think for me, like my whole kind of way of working is I want to get the sound as close to what I want while tracking. So I'm quite used to kind of, committing all the compression in, and I will kind of sum mics together. Like I don't mind, especially with guitars, if I've got multiple mics going, I'll just sum them to one because that's the guitar sound that, that we like. So why, I don't want to give myself loads of problems later on. So yeah, I mean, I'm very much kind of, I commit the tones on the way in. So I'm printing like a lot of the analog stuff on the way in.
Very cool. So before we dive into some of the digital, let's just talk about some of your analog chains real quick. And when it comes to, let's just use the example of guitar because it's so much in my mind now that I'm looking at all those amp heads. What might one or two common guitar chains for you look like? One or two examples of what would be going into kind of front end of the chain for a typical day in recording for you?
Mic-wise, it varies. I'll use like a 57 and then maybe I'll pair that with like a Royal 121 or sometimes a Beyerdynamic 160. Mm-hmm. I might have, a couple of options there. And then preamp wise, I kind of like, if it's kind of fast music, then I'll prefer something like an API style preamp. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I really love the Chandler TG2s as well. Mm-hmm. And then they will hit API EQs where I can kind of shape the sound a little bit if I want. I think the main thing for me that I've discovered in the last year is these boxes by Roger Mayer. They're called 456 and they're tape process simulators. And they just sound incredible on guitars. You can adjust like how saturated they can be, and there's a bias control so you can kind of make them brighter like the tape might react, and they're just incredible. So I've been kind of using those all over guitars for me.
Good stuff. So in the initial tracking, really getting things done in this fun, intuitive, tactile, physical, analog way. And then once you have everything recorded, like you were saying to me, you tend to not bring it back outside of the box and go into that extra layer of complexity and conversion and all that, and are keeping things mostly digital. I'm curious, once you've done your basic recording and now you're in post-production and mixing stage, what are some of the kinds of tools that you're using most often in the box to complement those recordings you've made?
It is pretty much a lot of the Plugin Alliance stuff, to be honest. Like for me, I still want to kind of shape things. The beauty for me of being in the box is because I work on so much stuff that it allows me to kind of recall a mix from last week or, from a month ago or whatever, and it's exactly where I left off. So I've been kind of searching for what sounds, close to like, for instance, like the Plugin Alliance SSL E channel is something that's across all my, almost all my channels. Because I'm a huge fan of that console, and that plugin just seems to nail the sound of that EQ really well. And I love it because, it's kind of the sound of rock, that, that EQ. It's like, it's not smooth. It's very aggressive, and it's got, it's got a sound to it. So, I mean, things like that I've been using. I love the Opticom from Plugin Alliance as well, which I've been using loads. But yeah, like for me, I try not to have like a long list of plugins. I find the ones that I really like, because I like to mix fairly fast as well. I kind of go with my gut instinct when I'm mixing, so I don't want to be kind of like looking at a endless screen of stuff and be thinking, oh, what should I use?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, having a tremendous variety of plugins to choose from is great for discovery, but at a certain point, to get really into the flow of something, you kind of got to pick your go-tos and say, hey, here's the list that I'm mostly going to be using, and keep on coming back to them. And every once in a while, when you get bored, you go back to the giant list to do a little bit more discovery.
Exactly.
And fold some new things into the workload. And now, where would you be using tools like that? Are you the kind of guy who is doing a lot of bus processing, or are you doing a lot of individual track processing? Do you have an approach to that where maybe first you start with a mix bus or master buses and then work your way back to individual tracks, or do you build up from individual tracks?
So here's the thing. So I came from mixing out the box. So I was on a console before with like piles and piles of outboard. And when I moved to mixing in the box, I initially found it really difficult to kind of get, like when you're mixing on a console, like things just start gelling together really easily. I didn't find that was happening for me in the box when I first started. But I think the trick within the box is, for me anyway, is I mix into a 2-bus chain that's already there, and that's giving me some kind of vibe and color, and that's, so for me, like the one thing that I've had on my 2-bus is that the Townhouse.
Oh, I love that one.
That is the most incredible SSL. It's like an SSL compressor, but with a little more excitement. I don't know what's in it, but
the same way, whenever I need an SSL compressor these days, I'm pulling up the Townhouse. There's just some, I don't know, it's not quite grit, but excitement's a good word for it. It's just got a little bit more attitude. And that's one of the things I've been impressed with Plugin Alliance again and again, is that they make some of the most analog-y sounding, vibey stuff where you kind of bring up the Townhouse and it already has a tone, just like when you're working with analog gear. And that's one of the things I've loved about so much of their stuff, is that they have a tone just from firing them up,
Yeah, totally. I think for me as well, with the plugin world, I'm looking for things that have got some kind of character and have got some kind of vibe, because I've already recorded the stuff how I want it to be. So I think anything I use in the box has got to give me some extra color, or it's got to give me, some kind of excitement. So yeah, I mean, that thing I'm pretty much using on my mix bus all the time.
Right. Now, I'm curious, having talked a little bit about compression on the mix bus, that EQ232D, the Bettermaker, I just started trying out for the first time this week. I was impressed by it. What were your impressions of that? What did you like about? Where do you find it's a particularly useful tool?
It's amazing. I think the way that you put it earlier when you were introducing it is kind of perfect. It's like it's that Pultac thing, but it's not as gritty. It's like a really smooth kind of, like the top end especially was incredible. It's a very open sound, and I kind of like that cleanness, because sometimes I want to kind of make a round like boost in the low end or something, but I don't want to kind of distort that too much. And it's just been incredible. Like I started using it, and it kind of immediately stayed on my mix bus after that.
Good stuff. Well, I know you're a super busy guy. You really were able to cut out a little slice of time for us today. I so appreciate you taking the time. Before I let you go, any last thoughts you want to leave us with, either favorite toys or things that you've been focusing on lately that you're excited about?
Well, I run an audio community called Control Room, which I spend a lot of my time in there. That's been amazing, especially with lockdown. Everyone's kind of been stuck in the house a little bit, and that's just been an amazing community to kind of hang out in. And we exchange loads of techniques there. And
this is where members can access you and a few other kind of producer engineer mentors to kind of ask questions with and get tutorial videos and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. It's control-room.net if anyone watching wants to check it out.
Wonderful. We'll definitely check him out there. You can also check Romesh out at his website. It's romeshdodangoda.com. That's ROMESHDODANGODA. Super excited to be talking with you today, and super excited about your work and that Grammy nomination this past year for working with Bring Me the Horizon on their latest record. So congrats on that. Man, I feel like we could geek out about gear the whole rest of the day, but I appreciate you were able to carve this little slice of time out for us to talk about a few of your favorite plugins and your approach to balancing analog and digital. Thanks again so much, Romesh, for joining us. This has been Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop. I'm with Plugin Alliance today. And if you want to try out that Bettermaker EQ232D that we were talking about, this super clean, open, Pultec style EQ, you can try out that or any of the other plugins that Plugin Alliance make totally for free at plugin-alliance.com. That's plugin-alliance.com. I'm going to put in a second vote for that townhouse compressor that Romesh brought up. Man, anytime I need an SSL style compressor on a master these days, that's the first one I'm pulling up. So big thanks to those guys for making this conversation possible. Big thanks to you, Romesh, for making this conversation possible.
My pleasure.
Thanks for hanging out with us. See you next time.